I woke up to the sound of machines beeping. The ceiling was white, the kind of white that hurts your eyes when you stare too long. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, or why my throat felt so dry. Then it hit me. This was a hospital. I tried to sit up, but my arms felt like stone. The nurse rushed over, pressing me gently back down. "Easy, Mrs. Lawson. You fainted at work. You've been unconscious for nearly 6 hours." My voice cracked. "Where's my husband? Did anyone call Ethan?" She hesitated, glancing toward the door before saying quietly, "We called him. He hasn't come yet." That silence after her words. It was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, so she wouldn't see the tears pooling at the corners. When I finally opened them again, the room was darker. Only the soft glow from the IV monitor filled the space. My phone lay on the side table. No missed calls, no messages. Just a wallpaper of a smiling couple taken 2 years ago at a beach in Florida. Me and Ethan. Back then, I thought that smile would last forever. I used to believe love meant sacrifice, that if I just kept giving, more patience, more understanding, more chances, Ethan would eventually become the man I fell for. But somewhere along the line, I became invisible. He thought I was just a marketing assistant with a modest income. He never knew the company he bragged about working for was actually owned by me. I had built it quietly, behind the scenes, under my maiden name, Mara Hayes. The irony. Ethan loved to complain about his boss being demanding. I used to listen, hiding a smile. But now, lying in this sterile room, I didn't feel like laughing anymore. Something inside me had snapped that night. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was his absence. But deep down, I knew this was the moment my life would split in two. Before I opened my eyes in that hospital, and after. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, cutting thin golden lines across the white floor. My phone buzzed on the tray beside me, a message from my mother. "Heard you were admitted. Are you okay, sweetheart?" But not a word from Ethan. I typed back a quick lie. Just low blood pressure. Nothing serious. Then I deleted it and stared at the empty text box for a long time before pressing send. My fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of pretending everything was fine. The doctor came in not long after, flipping through a file. "Your scans show exhaustion and irregular glucose levels. You've been pushing your body too hard, Mara. You need to rest." Rest. The word almost made me laugh. Rest was something other people got to have. For me, it was emails at 3 a.m., negotiations over coffee instead of breakfast, hiding success behind silence. When the doctor left, I dialed Ethan again. It rang 5 times before his voice came through, groggy, impatient. "Yeah?" "Ethan, I'm in the hospital." "Yeah, I heard. You okay?" I passed out at work. Pause. Then, when are you coming home? I've got that dinner with Carl tonight. Don't bail on me last minute." I bit my lip so hard it hurt. "You're asking me to come home? You could at least... Look, babe, I'm dealing with stuff too, all right? You'll be fine. You always are." Click. He hung up. For a long minute, I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the empty line. That was the moment I realized Ethan wasn't going to show up. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever when I needed him most. And yet, something in his voice sounded off. Not just cold, nervous, like a man hiding something. Later that evening, when the nurse brought my dinner, I saw it. A small bank alert flashing on my phone. $3,200 withdrawn. Joint account. Ethan had always said money was tight. But $3,200? At midnight? My gut twisted. It wasn't the money. It was the timing. While I was lying here hooked to IVs, he was out spending thousands. I didn't know where, but I knew I was about to find out. I got discharged 2 days later. Ethan didn't show up to pick me up, of course. He just texted, "Uber home? I'm stuck in traffic." That was his version of love. Short, lazy messages that felt more like tasks than care. When I got home, the house smelled faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne. His shoes were kicked near the couch, jacket tossed carelessly on a chair. Nothing had changed, except for one thing. There was a crumpled receipt lying under the coffee table. I bent down, half annoyed, half curious. A hotel charge. The Willow Suites, dated 2 nights ago. Room service for 2, wine, dessert, and the name on the signature line, Ethan Lawson. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I just stood there, gripping the paper so hard it left creases in my palm. My first thought wasn't he cheated. It was of course he did. Because deep down, I'd known. For months. The late nights, the sudden gym trips, the cologne he never used before. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the city lights through the window. I felt something inside me shift. Not pain. Not rage. Just stillness. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. When Ethan came home past midnight, he looked startled to see me. "Oh, you're back." "Yeah," I said softly. "Traffic must have been bad." He blinked. "What?" "Nothing. Just something you said in your text." He walked past me to the fridge, opened a beer and mumbled, "You look tired. You should sleep." I almost laughed. He didn't notice the envelope in my hand. I'd slipped the hotel receipt inside, proof of his carelessness. When he went upstairs, I stayed awake. I opened my laptop, logged into an account Ethan didn't know existed, my company's private server. Within minutes, I had his work schedule, emails, and all recent invoices from his firm. That's when I saw it. His company had just signed a deal worth $2. $4 million. And the client's name? MH Innovations. My company. Ethan had no idea he'd been bragging to my employees for months about how he nailed a deal that my own signature had approved. I stared at the screen, the irony almost cruel. My husband cheated on me while building his career off my name. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, Ethan acted like everything was normal. He hummed while making coffee, kissed me on the cheek like a man who didn't spend the night in another woman's bed and said, "Hey, you're feeling better, right? I've got a big presentation today. Wish me luck." I smiled. Always. He grinned, grabbed his keys, and left, not knowing that I was no longer the same woman he'd left at the hospital. I sat at the dining table, watching his car disappear down the street. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. "Leah, it's me," I said quietly. There was a pause. "Mara, I didn't expect this call. What's wrong?" "I need your help, confidentially." Leah used to be my company's head of legal before she moved to another firm. She was sharp, discreet and loyal, one of the few people who knew who really owned MH Innovations. When she came over later that evening, I handed her the hotel receipt, the joint account withdrawal record, and copies of Ethan's recent work emails. She looked through everything in silence. Then she looked up at me and said, "You're not calling because you're hurt. You're calling because you're planning something." I met her gaze. You're right. For years, I'd played the quiet, supportive wife. I'd let him believe I needed him, that my world revolved around his approval. It made him comfortable, too comfortable. But now, I was done playing small. "I want every legal document ready," I said. "Divorce, asset protection, everything. And Leah, keep my name out of any public filings until I say so." She nodded slowly. He has no idea who he's dealing with, does he? I smiled faintly. No, and that's what makes it perfect. When she left, I went upstairs to Ethan's office. It smelled of his cologne and arrogance. On his desk was a framed photo, us on our wedding day. I picked it up, traced my finger across the glass, then placed it face down. That night, when Ethan came home bragging about how amazing his pitch went, I listened, nodding like the same quiet wife he always saw. Inside, though, every word he said became another piece of ammunition. He thought he was building his empire. He didn't realize I was already building the trap that would make it crumble. 2 days later, Ethan left for another business trip. He said he'd be gone 3 nights, some conference in Chicago. He even packed the same navy blazer he always wore when he wanted to look important. After his car disappeared from the driveway, I opened his laptop. The password hadn't changed in years. Our wedding date. Within minutes, I was staring at his inbox. Hundreds of emails, mostly boring logistics updates. But one name kept showing up in the sent folder. Tessa H. Her emails were short, flirty, and far too familiar for a coworker. Thanks for the flowers. You didn't have to. Next time, you're choosing the restaurant. Don't tell your wife I'm stealing your time again. My stomach twisted. I clicked on her company ID signature, Tessa Hartley, Assistant Project Manager, and then my heart sank deeper. Tessa wasn't just a random coworker. She worked under him, on the same project tied to my company. I scrolled further, until one attachment stopped me cold. A photo. It was the 2 of them at a rooftop bar, champagne glasses in hand, the skyline glowing behind them. Ethan's arm was around her waist. She couldn't have been older than 24. He looked happy, carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years. I should have cried, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb, staring at the picture until my laptop screen dimmed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. By morning, my decision was clear. I called Eric, my COO, the only person who still knew me as Ms. Hayes. Eric, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need to review all contracts with Lawson Group immediately, especially the Chicago deal. He hesitated. That's Ethan's company, right? Yes, I said. And I want full details of who was involved in the negotiations. Names, dates, everything. By noon, he sent the report. I opened the PDF and felt my throat tighten. Listed under Project Associates, Tessa Hartley. Listed under lead negotiator, Ethan Lawson. My husband hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd been sleeping with an employee involved in a deal tied directly to my company's money. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was business fraud, and I suddenly knew exactly how to destroy him. Legally, completely, and quietly. I sat in my home office that afternoon with the blinds half closed, coffee gone cold beside my laptop. The skyline outside looked indifferent, like a world that had watched too many small tragedies to be surprised by another. I pulled up the Lawson files and began to trace every line item, every signature, every date. It felt oddly intimate, peeling back the layers of the life he'd been building while I cleaned up after him. Eric came by, closed the door, and leaned on the desk. "You sure about this?" he asked. He'd always been my anchor, the one who balanced my impulse for quiet revenge with the steady hand of strategy. "I want the Chicago contract audited," I said. "Full compliance check, expense trails, vendor invoices, everything. If there's the smallest irregularity, freeze payments and notify legal." My voice was calm. Calm made things more dangerous. He nodded. "We'll need proof. We make it airtight. No one can accuse us of playing dirty. We prepared it like surgeons. Leah drafted legal notices. Eric pulled accounting reports and flagged every late-night wire, every invoice that looked oddly inflated. We didn't need to fabricate anything. Ethan had been sloppy, drunk on the illusion of his own success. His receipts, his signature styles, the way he routed expenses through shell vendors, small things that added up to a pattern. That evening, I sat across from a mirror and watched my reflection plan his undoing. I felt no glee, only a deep, cold clarity. It wasn't about hurting him for the sake of cruelty. It was about reclaiming the life I'd been living in the background. It was about making sure the man who'd treated me like a convenience would face the consequences of that comfort. We executed the freeze on Monday at 8 a.m. Notifications went out. Compliance hold. Pending investigation. The Lawson group called, flustered. Brandon, Ethan, swept into the office later, paper in hand, cursing when emails flooded his phone. He called me, frantic and blustering, trying to act outraged. I listened. I let him talk himself into a corner, while Leah prepared the legal paperwork that would make him vulnerable. I heard the crack in his voice when he realized the partner company he'd relied on for credibility was suddenly walking away. He thought I would come apart. Instead, I sat straighter. If you had acted like the man I married, I said into the phone, this wouldn't be happening. Silence on the line. Then him. You did this. I let the phone drop to my chest and stared at the ceiling. He didn't understand the worst part. I hadn't done it for revenge alone. I'd done it to wake myself up. 3 days after the audit notice went out, Ethan's world began to unravel. He came home late, eyes bloodshot, tie half loosened, carrying that same briefcase he once bragged was a symbol of power. This time, it looked heavy. He dropped it on the floor and just stood there staring at me. They froze the entire account, Mara. The Chicago deal, gone. Peterson wants answers. Investors are threatening to pull out. You don't understand how bad this is? I looked up from my laptop, feigning confusion. What happened? He paced, running his hands through his hair. They said there's a compliance review, something about conflict of interest. Someone's sabotaging me. Someone's feeding them lies. I tilted my head. Maybe you should talk to your boss. His laugh came out bitter. You think this is funny? I could lose everything. I met his eyes. Everything you built on lies tends to fall apart eventually, Ethan. He froze. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just closed my laptop, stood up, and walked past him. For once, the silence wasn't mine to carry. That night, I watched him from the balcony. He sat alone in the living room, scrolling through his phone, muttering to himself. His confidence gone. The man who once called himself the backbone of this house now looked small, hunched, desperate. By the end of the week, it got worse. His company suspended him pending investigation. His colleagues stopped returning calls. The same people who once praised him suddenly wanted distance. Meanwhile, I stayed composed. I went to work, attended meetings, smiled when people greeted Ms. Hayes, the woman no one knew was Ethan Lawson's wife. Leah sent me updates daily. Everything's moving fast, she said. Peterson's board already suspects him of violating ethics policy. We'll have official charges by next week. That evening, Ethan burst into my office at home, eyes wild. They fired me, he said, voice cracking. Do you get that? Fired. 20 years of work gone. You're calm about this? You could help me if you wanted to. I stared at him for a long time. Help you? You never asked if I needed help. Not once. He opened his mouth, then stopped, realizing he didn't have an argument left. His world was collapsing, and for the first time, he knew it wasn't an accident. I walked past him toward the door and whispered, almost kindly, You built your empire on someone else's patience. Now it's gone. When the door closed behind me, I heard him curse under his breath. I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:12 a.m. An unfamiliar number. I answered, half expecting another investor call, but it was a woman's voice. Soft, nervous. Mrs. Lawson? Yes, who's this? A pause. My name is Tessa. I think you know who I am. My stomach clenched, but I kept my tone steady. I know exactly who you are. She hesitated, then whispered, I didn't know he was married. Not at first. He told me you two were separated. I only found out the truth when the investigation started. I said nothing. I wanted to hang up, but curiosity held me there. He said you ruined his career, she continued. That you're trying to destroy him. I almost laughed. And what do you think? I think he destroyed himself, she said quietly. And he's scared. He said if you don't stop whatever you're doing, he'll go public with everything. I smirked. He can try, but he'd be exposing his own fraud. Silence stretched on the line. Then she said softly, "He's not doing well. He's drinking. A lot. He said you were the reason his life's falling apart, but after what I've seen, I think he deserves it." When she hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring out the window. Part of me expected to feel triumphant, but all I felt was tired. Later that afternoon, Eric came by with a folder. "It's done," he said. The termination letters were sent. Lawson Group has officially lost its biggest contract. I nodded slowly, flipping through the papers. It was surreal, watching years of his arrogance crumble into black and white documents. "Do you want to go public?" Eric asked carefully. "No," I said. "Let the silence ruin him. It's louder that way." That night, Ethan came home again, this time unshaven, his eyes sunken. He slammed a stack of papers onto the counter. "You think I don't know? I know who runs MH Innovations. I know it's you, Mara. You used me." I looked up from my tea. "No, Ethan, I loved you." "You used that." He laughed bitterly, voice cracking. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll regret it on my own terms." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, defeated, staring at the woman he never really saw, the one who had stopped pretending to be smaller. 3 days later, I served him the papers. He was sitting at the kitchen table when the courier arrived. Unshaven, hair messy, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. He didn't even look up when the man said, "Mr. Lawson, you've been served." Ethan stared at the envelope for a long moment before tearing it open. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "Divorce?" he whispered. "You're actually doing this?" I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "It's already done. Those are just the signatures that make it official." He slammed the papers down. "You can't just throw away 10 years like it was nothing." I met his eyes. "You did that a long time ago, Ethan. I just finally stopped pretending it could be fixed." He stood up suddenly, voice rising. "You were supposed to be my partner. We were supposed to build this together." I almost laughed. "Build? You took what I built and called it yours." He froze, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't know you didn't want to know," I cut in. "You liked the version of me that needed you more than herself. The one who cooked, smiled, and kept quiet. That woman's gone." He sank back into the chair, head in his hands. For the first time, he didn't look angry, just broken. When I walked past him to leave, he reached out weakly. "Mara, please. I can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll get help." I stopped at the doorway. "You can't fix something you destroyed on purpose." Outside, the autumn wind was cold, sharp, but I felt lighter than I had in years. By the time I reached the car, my phone buzzed, a text from Leah. "Court accepted the filing. Property division will favor you. He has no claim to your company assets." I smiled faintly and typed back one word. "Perfect." That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in months. But at 2:43 a.m., my phone lit up. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. His voice was slurred, shaky. "I lost everything, Mara. My job, my home, even her. Please, just talk to me." I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, and whispered, "Now you finally know what it feels like to be invisible." And then I hung up. For the next few weeks, Ethan faded from my world like smoke. His calls stopped. The house was quiet again. Too quiet sometimes, but not in the way that hurt anymore. It felt clean, peaceful. Then one morning, Leah called. "You might want to hear this before it hits the papers," she said. Apparently, Ethan's name had surfaced in a legal inquiry. The company had discovered falsified invoices and personal expenses charged to corporate accounts, dinners, hotel stays, even jewelry, all under his signature. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a liability. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched his name online. There it was. A short article buried in the local business news. Former Lawson Group executive under investigation for ethics violations. There was a picture of him leaving the building. Eyes hidden behind dark glasses, shoulders hunched, face pale. I didn't feel joy. Just finality. Like watching the last chapter of a book I'd already finished. 2 days later, I got a voicemail. His voice was slow, heavy. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I could fix things before anyone noticed. I just wanted to prove I could be someone. I listened twice. The first time out of shock. The second time, because I wanted to remember the sound of a man realizing he was the author of his own downfall. When I didn't call back, he sent one last message. You were right. I never saw you for who you really were. I only saw what you could give me. I'm sorry, I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of closure. That weekend, I met Leah and Eric at a small cafe downtown. We sat by the window, the sun warm on our faces. It's over, Leah said softly. The settlement's complete. You're free. Free, I repeated, the word feeling new in my mouth. For years, I'd fought to keep my life from falling apart. Now I realized letting it fall was the only way I could rebuild it, without him in it. That night, I walked through my empty living room, the walls still echoing faintly with memories. I paused by the framed wedding photo I'd once turned face down. This time I didn't cry. I just opened the frame, took out the picture, and set it on the counter. Goodbye, Ethan, I whispered. Then I turned off the lights and didn't look back. It's strange how quiet freedom feels at first. No arguments echoing down the hall. No phone buzzing with excuses. Just the hum of my own breath. Steady, calm, alive. A month after the divorce was finalized, I sold the old house. Every corner held a ghost I didn't want to keep. The realtor asked if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more certain of anything. I moved into a smaller place, modern, bright, near the lake. No fancy decor, no polished marble floors, just space that felt mine. The first night I slept there, I left the windows open. The sound of water and wind replaced the shouting that used to fill my head. Work changed, too. I stopped hiding behind my maiden name. The board insisted on a press release introducing me as the official CEO of MH Innovations. For years, I'd run the company in silence, letting others take the credit. This time, I wanted my name on it. When the news broke, the office buzzed with surprise. Some people stared, others smiled knowingly, as if they'd always suspected. Eric gave me a small nod across the room. Proud, quiet, loyal. I wasn't nervous. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My mother visited a week later, bringing homemade soup and questions she'd been holding back for months. I kept wondering why you stayed so long, she said softly as we sat by the fireplace. I thought love meant endurance, I admitted. Turns out it means knowing when to stop breaking yourself for someone who never deserved you. She reached over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, I'm proud of you. After she left, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight dance on the lake. I thought of Ethan, not with hatred, not with pain, just as someone I used to know. Someone who taught me what losing yourself looks like, and what finding yourself feels like after. The next morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair had grown back thicker, shorter. My eyes looked different, not softer, but stronger. I smiled at the woman staring back. I missed you, I whispered, and for once I meant it. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had just finished a meeting downtown when I stopped by a small cafe to escape the storm. The air smelled of coffee and wet pavement, peaceful, until I heard a voice behind me. Mara. I turned. Ethan. For a split second, I thought I was imagining him. He looked older, thinner, tired, eyes carrying the weight of too many sleepless nights. His shirt was wrinkled, his once perfect hair flecked with gray. He gave a weak smile. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. I said nothing, just nodded politely. He motioned to the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit? I hesitated, then gestured for him too. Maybe part of me needed this. Closure. Face to face. He sat down, hands trembling around the coffee cup the waiter brought over. You look different, he said softly. I am, he nodded, eyes glancing down. I've been sober for 38 days. That's good, I said. My tone was calm, but inside, I felt a strange mix of pity and detachment. He exhaled. I lost everything, Mara. The house, my reputation, even the car. I'm living with a friend now. And Tessa, she moved away months ago. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. He looked up suddenly, eyes glossy. You probably hate me. You should. But I think about you every day. How blind I was.
How cruel. I met his gaze.
I don't hate you, Ethan. I just finally stopped loving the version of you I made up in my head. He winced, but there was no anger, just acceptance. I'm proud of you, he whispered after a pause. You built something incredible. You always did. I just never saw it until it was too late. I smiled faintly. You seeing it now doesn't change the past. But maybe it'll change who you become next. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't argue. He just nodded, quietly wiping his eyes. When I stood to leave, he said, Do you ever think about what we could have been? I stopped, my hand on the door. Sometimes, I said. But then I remember, if I hadn't lost you, I never would have found myself. And then I walked out into the rain, head high, heart calm. No more ghosts chasing me. It had been 6 months since that rainy afternoon. Spring had arrived early that year, soft and golden, and for once, my life matched the season. Every morning, I walked by the lake near my new home. The air smelled of pine and fresh rain. Birds sang somewhere in the trees, and the sun rose slow and gentle over the horizon. It didn't feel like a new chapter anymore. It felt like peace. One morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, Eric stopped by. He'd become more than just my COO. He was the friend who'd quietly held me together through everything. You look happy, he said, smiling. I am, I answered. Finally, he nodded toward the water. You ever think about starting over, maybe someone new? I laughed softly. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm exactly where I want to be. Alone but not lonely. He smiled understanding. You earned that peace, Mara. After he left, I sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight ripple across the lake. I thought about how far I'd come. From the woman who once begged for love to the one who learned to give it to herself. The world hadn't changed much, but I had. I no longer measured my worth by someone else's attention, no longer shrank to make someone else comfortable. No longer apologized for being powerful. Later that day, I got an email from the hospital, my annual checkup results. All clear, I smiled, whispering a quiet thank you to the universe. That evening, I opened my journal and wrote one last line under everything that had happened. Some people lose everything and find themselves. Others lose someone and realize they were the everything they needed all along. I closed the book, set it on the shelf, and poured myself a glass of wine. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in gold and rose. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my face, and whispered, I made it, because I had. I wasn't the woman who waited for someone to choose her anymore. I was the woman who finally chose herself, and for the first time in my life. That was enough.